Something I've learned to do when I'm feeling lost is reframe the way I think about my lack of direction. What if feeling dissatisfied with my daily routine was not a curse, but a privilege? Having direction and meaning is a fantastic feeling, but everyone has experienced that feeling of being stuck. Once upon a time, I worked at an investment bank, and it was the exact place I had been trying to get a job at for years. But very quickly, within weeks, possibly even days, I realized that it wasn't an environment I could survive. The day-to-day work brought me no joy. And sometimes that's okay. For example, if you're a cog in a machine for a big picture project that you think has value for society, it doesn't really matter if the work itself that you're doing is a little dry. You're part of a greater cause. But I personally couldn't find any meaning at any level of the project I was on. And I was working very long hours to be a small part of facilitating a company's goals that I just wasn't interested in. I do want to be clear that this is a subjective statement and feeling. I'm passing absolutely no judgment on others who work in this industry. We're all individuals, and the point is that I couldn't find any fulfillment in this job, not that there isn't any fulfillment to be had in this job. And it's not to say that the services aren't valuable. It's just that with my particular personality, I found the work left me directionless. And being directionless left me terrified because this job was something I had invested so many years pursuing. And suddenly I had to reconcile the fact that it all felt very hollow and that I had wasted all this time getting to a place that I didn't want to be. So I needed to discover who I was, given I wasn't who I thought I was. And when I came to this conclusion, my strategy was to make life outside of work as rich and varied as possible. So I joined bands, I wrote poetry, I entered short story competitions, I went hiking in exotic places, I dabbled in game design, I read philosophy, I started a business or two, I tried various drugs, tried new sports, I tried to even learn how to dance, and that's probably the area I failed the most miserably. I also got into meditation and I traveled extensively. And eventually through trial and error, I did find out which of these things really made me jump out of bed, which of these things gave me a new lease on life. And it was music that had really left me feeling inspired. Music was already a big part of my life, but it was a side gig. It was something for fun while I, pursued this big money-making job. But I found myself hungering for making music, every minute of every day. And so I auditioned at Sydney Conservatorium. And all of a sudden, I was in a new degree. And I was completely reinvigorated. But looking back on this whole experience, I realized that the time I was miserable at the bank was the catalyst to rampant exploration and self-discovery. I have never met so many new people and tried so many new things in such a short period of time. And not all of it clicked. But each time I put myself in a novel situation, I had this little espresso shot of excitement, this feeling that I was doing something fresh, that there was this entire new world to explore. Not to mention, doing all of these different things made me a more interesting person. And learning about some of these things, even the things I gave up very quickly, still helps me today to tie different ideas together, to link different concepts, and to just generally be more creative. So this is the rule I've come up with. When you're sick of your routine, just break your routine. One thing I've been trying to do is try and walk somewhere new each week. And I don't hold myself to anything too exotic. It doesn't have to be crazy. Just a new side street or back alley, a path off a bushwalk. I find it's often very rewarding mentally and physically. So for a physical example, The other day I discovered this quaint little swing set engulfed in pink and blue hydrangeas. And it was beautiful, and it was a fun place to sit and contemplate. But more interestingly, going off the beaten track also is very cognitively rewarding. I often find myself coming up with new ideas or creative solutions to old problems when I'm in places that I'm not normally. And so the goal when you're stuck in a rut is not necessarily to find your new lifelong passion. It can be just to reap the benefits of doing something differently. And I looked into this phenomenon to see if it was a me thing or a science thing, and it does seem to be backed up empirically. A 2018 study on creative incubation found that even minor changes in environment or activities stimulate creative thinking by providing new stimuli that can help connect previously unrelated ideas. And studies on cognitive flexibility demonstrate that adults who varied their routine showed improvements in working memory, in cognitive adaptability, and had increased brain activity in regions associated with learning. A 2019 study on mindful routines revealed that people who intentionally varied their activities and practiced mindful observation of the changes in their routine reported higher life satisfaction and reduced symptoms of anxiety. So there really is a lot of scientific evidence backing up the idea that trying new things has tremendous benefits to both your cognitive ability and just your general mental health. Quite literally, eating something different to what you normally eat for lunch could be what sparks your next innovation or idea or philosophy on the meaning of life. Or that act of doing something different may be what dissipates the very feeling of directionlessness you were originally trying to solve. So going back to my original example of, leaving a bank to enroll in music school, obviously not everyone is in a position where they can just give up their day job and enroll in a new degree or travel across the world. We have financial responsibilities and mortgages and maybe families. I obviously didn't have any of those things at the time. But the change doesn't necessarily have to be that drastic. It's just breaking the routine in some way. It can be as simple as reading a book on natural science, or taking a ceramics course, or trying mixed beach volleyball. You never know if some subset of skills you develop or if someone you meet doing this new thing will be what leads you to finding your direction later on. Building good habits is something we emphasize a lot in society. And good habits are fantastic for so many reasons. But one thing they don't tend to foster is creativity. Habits are about building routine, not escaping it. And despite what every self-help book will have you believe, you actually need a bit of both. You need a bit of habit and you need a bit of spontaneity. And let's not forget, doing something new is fun and useful. Even if you end up hating that activity, you're always left with a win-win. You have the upside of potentially discovering something you love, and you have the additional upside of never having to do it again if it sucked. Late last year, I found myself a little sick of my routine, and so something I tried to do is head to the beach at least once a week to build sandcastles. I have no idea why I started doing it. I can't remember. Maybe I saw some YouTube short of an epic sandcastle and became totally inspired. But I started heading to the beach weekly and building these shitty little sandcastles, and mine were terrible. But the experience was awesome. Even though it didn't become, my new career, I didn't become a professional sandcastle builder. And frankly, I haven't built a sandcastle for months. But what a great feeling it is to be obsessed with something, even if that obsession just vanishes, even if it just disappears overnight. Now, something we do have to recognize is that the endless pursuit of new experience can be born of a deeper dissatisfaction. It can be born of a problematic craving. It becomes murky territory as to whether or not new experiences should be something that we as humans should pursue. And you'll get a lot of very wise people saying completely opposite things in this space. In fact, I've interviewed monks who can find deep fulfillment staring for days at a brick wall. But that ability has taken them years to cultivate, and is reserved for the most enlightened gurus. They can do the same thing forever and never feel bored or devoid of meaning. But for us, mere mortals, however, I think we can start with more humble goals, and we have more to gain than we have to lose by leaping into the unknown. Thank you so much for listening. I'll be back on Monday to chat about some big ideas as a prelude to a wonderful series of guests we have lined up through November and December. And remember to check out the Patreon if you're interested in some of the additional perks I talked about at the top of the show. Again, I've linked it in the description, or you can go to patreon.com/TOL Club. I'm Jonah Primo. This is the Overexamined Live. Have a great weekend.